Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So the NCAA had a meeting yesterday to discuss transgender athletes competing in women's categories, male athletes competing in women's sports. And of course, a lot of people wanted to have their input to urge them to make the right decision. So we had over 3,000 athletes come together to admonish the NCAA to follow in the footsteps of the NAIA, who recently banned transgender athletes from women's categories. And of course, you had the other side who came together to urge them to continue to allow them to compete against women. A bunch of woke athletes, former and present, came together to advocate for male athletes to compete against girls and women. Their focus was on the transgender athletes, what they want. No fault for the women, no fault for the girls. So the group at the forefront of the campaign to push the NCAA to continue to allow male athletes into women's sports is Athlete Ally. They're an advocacy group for LGBTQ athletes. And this is the organization who mocked women, who mocked female athletes for taking the NCAA to court. So there's a case going on as we speak where a group of female athletes took the NCAA to court for violating Title IX. Well, at least the old Title IX. 16 female athletes came together, including Riley Gaines from various sports, to talk about what they have lost because of the NCAA policies that allow male athletes, such as Leah Thomas, to talk about what they went through in the locker room, to talk about how they felt having to compete against transgender athletes, how they felt knowing that they're in an unfair competition, how they felt losing to these athletes who shouldn't have even been in their category in the first place. So let me refresh your memory of how this organization feels towards women. We empathize with the pain felt by any athlete who falls short of their athletic goals, but singling out, scapegoating, or otherwise targeting trans athletes as a cause for those failures is unfounded and perpetuates stigma, stereotypes, and discrimination against transgender Americans. So the only reason women don't want trans athletes in their categories is because they're failures. They fall short of their athletic goals and they're taking it out on the poor, vulnerable male athlete. That's what this organization thinks of women. So they wrote a letter to the NCAA, which was signed by various athletes, including Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird. Megan Rapinoe is a footballer or soccer player who was in the women's national team, and Sue Bird is a WNBA legend. Megan Rapinoe, who lost to under 15 high school boys. So they decided to throw women under the bus so they could virtue signal. Never mind that their careers are over and it will not affect them. But for some reason, they think it's appropriate to advocate for male athletes to infringe upon women's sports. They think it's appropriate to advocate for men to be in the women's locker room. They think it's appropriate to totally ignore everything Riley Gaines went through, Paula Scallon went through. The nerve of a WNBA legend to be advocating for something that will completely destroy all the progress the WNBA has made in recent years, all the progress women's basketball has made, particularly at college level. Transgender athletes coming into the WNBA will literally derail everything that the women have achieved so far. If you want women to get paid more, guess what? More people are going to have to watch women's basketball. More people are going to have to watch women's football. That's not going to happen if we have a bunch of transgender athletes competing. Trust me, nobody wants to see that. Instead of advocating for more people to buy tickets, for more people to watch the women's basketball finals, South Carolina against Iowa, their ratings was 18.7 million viewers, the largest viewership since 2019 for both men and women. It drew in about 4 million more viewers than the men's finals. The women's basketball is finally getting the recognition it deserves. People are finally paying attention. And we want them to pay attention for the right reasons. Because of the personality of the athletes, because of the sheer level of skill that these women display. Not because there's a bunch of transgender athletes dunking on the women. making a mockery of women's sports. We don't want people watching for those reasons. So think about what you're advocating for. Think about the young women coming up behind you. Why would you advocate for their careers to essentially be derailed? You wouldn't be a WNBA legend if you had to compete against male athletes. None of you would be. Would we have the likes of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese if they had to compete against men? Of course not. So why would you advocate for something that could take away a woman's opportunity to have a successful career in sports? Why would you advocate for that? Yet call yourself a feminist. Caitlin Clark has just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Nike. Those opportunities wouldn't come her way if she had to compete against transgender athletes. You know who would be getting the deals? Probably the transgender athlete.
Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, from what I can tell, have a lot of medals and a lot of money. And you know what they don't have? Daughters. So they can take a seat, because those of us who do and need to worry about their safety and their fair play object to your desire to push men into women's sports. And I don't give a damn, and most people don't, what you call me or others who feel as I do. I will fight you. I will fight you tooth and nail as you try to endanger my child and take away her fair shot at a medal, at winning, at the wonderful feeling of crossing the finish line first or winning in a fair game.
So we also had 12 House Republicans urging the NCAA to do the right thing at their meeting yesterday. I don't know the outcome of the meeting as of the recording of this video, but they pointed out that Lia Thomas became the first transgender athlete to win an NCAA national title, something Lia was unable to do while competing against male athletes. While he was William Thomas, he was ranked 460 something. He was unable to win any NCAA national titles as a man. But the moment Lia comes over into women's sports, Lia ends up getting a title. How convenient. So Athlete Allies letter said the following: "We, the undersigned, call upon the NCAA, a governing body meant to serve athletes and our well-being, to ensure that the life-saving power of sport is accessible to all athletes who compete in championship and emerging sports at and for NCAA member institutions, including transgender athletes. To deny transgender athletes the fundamental right to be who they are, to access the sport they love, and to receive the proven mental and physical health benefits of sport goes against the very principles of the NCAA's constitution. By barring transgender athletes, you would be severely limiting the capacity of your member institutions to protect and support their athletes. Moreover, you would be actively disparaging transgender athletes, the same athletes you chose to protect when you agreed to serve on the board of governors. And you know who was mentioned in the letter? Whose support they cited and highlighted? Dawn Staley, who people wondered whether she believed what she was saying. Maybe she just said it because she didn't want to rock the boat and end up being accused of breaching her contract and end up losing her job. Well, she said it, and they're using her as an example of support. They're using what she said at the press conference to push their agenda, to advocate for male athletes, to infringe upon women's sports, to infringe upon women's locker rooms. So be careful what you say. Be careful what you seem to agree to, because your very words will be used against you. Your very words will be used in this agenda against women, against female athletes. Banning transgender athletes from women's categories will not make sports inaccessible to them. If you really cared about their inclusion, you'd be advocating for a third category. That way, women's sports can remain integral, women's sports can remain safe and fair, and they can still participate. But you don't care about that. You want them to be appeased. You want them to get what they want. It's not their rights. It's what they want. To be appeased, to feel validated, and to also take advantage of their male body that usually gives them an advantage over the women. And now, all of a sudden, they're winning titles. They're winning tournaments. Something they couldn't do while competing against other male athletes. they're taking advantage of it. Now they're somebody. That's what this is all about. That's why many of them aren't even interested in an open category. Some of them have even said it's unsafe. The irony. And let me just say, I feel the pain of any male athlete who falls short of their athletic goals. But hijacking women's sports and using your male bodies to dominate the female athletes, to compensate for your failures, is not the answer. It is wrong and perpetuates misogyny. Taking away the life-saving power of sports from women is also not the answer, especially as we're talking about women's sports. These categories belong to women, and you're pushing them out of their own sports because you want to force male athletes into their category. Women deserve fair and safe sport. The absence of that directly leads to the exclusion of female athletes. We're talking about inclusion. Why is the inclusion of women not considered? Why is it okay to exclude women from their own sports? Taking away fairness and safety is a form of exclusion within itself. No matter how accomplished they are as athletes, they will never be male. So they're missing out on placing for tournaments, qualifying. They're missing out on records. They're missing out on victories. They're missing out on placing first, second, or third. All of that's been taken away from them. That is a form of exclusion. And of course, many women will self-exclude once male athletes enter their categories. They don't want to be in the locker room with biological men. They don't want to have to compete against biological men, some of whom can be quite aggressive, can be quite mean-spirited, can be quite domineering, rude. We've seen examples of this. I'm not making it up. Some of them have certain fetishes, conditions. They don't want to be in the locker room with them, and they shouldn't be made to do something that goes against their consent. Some women are triggered by being put in that situation in the first place. Some of these sporting bodies didn't even have the courtesy to warn the women that there was going to be a male in their locker room. When it came to Leah Thomas, for example, some of these sporting bodies even took away male and female locker rooms. They basically changed their rules to allow all males into the locker room just to get around the issue, just to welcome the transgender athlete. So basically taking away the protection of women. They took away their protections all to accommodate male athletes. No female athlete should be injured by a male athlete because that person shouldn't be in their category to begin with. We've had female athletes who have been injured, and the fact is a female athlete is more likely to be injured when competing against males. That's just fact. That's not bigotry or an exaggeration. Yes, women have injuries when they compete in sports, but that's when they're competing against other women. The sort of injuries they can sustain at the hands of a male athlete will usually be a lot worse and a lot more frequent. And of course, sport does have proven mental and physical health benefits. But saying that transgender athletes cannot compete in women's sports doesn't take that away from them. They can still compete in a category that aligns with their sex. Or you could advocate for open categories or third category of some kind. But what Athlete Ally doesn't seem to care about is taking away the mental and physical benefits of sports from women. That doesn't seem to matter to them.
Hi, my name is April Hutchinson. I'm a competitive powerlifter with the Canadian Powerlifting Union. 2 days ago, we saw a biological male literally crush the women's masters powerlifting category by almost 500 pounds, taking away the national records, also the second highest deadlift in powerlifting history. So men don't have an advantage, right? Okay. It's so important to keep women and girls sports fair and safe. We need to use our voices, men and women, to let everyone know that fairness and safety has to be top priority of every federation. Any woman, man, or federation that supports men lifting or competing with women is part of the problem, and they should be ashamed, and they are literally helping erase women's sports. So I ask you, Please use your voice. You will not be silenced. It is imperative to speak up. We are the majority, not the minority. We speak truth and facts. Bodies play sports, not identities.
April Hutchinson has been excluded by her sporting body. She's now on a 1-year suspension. They initially gave her a 2-year suspension, when they know full well that she uses powerlifting as part of her recovery from alcohol addiction. They gave no thought to how excluding her would affect her. They gave no thought to how infringing upon her free speech, demonizing her, putting a target on her back would affect her and potentially derail her recovery. Thankfully it didn't, and it's made her nothing but stronger throughout all of this. It could have very well sent her down the wrong path again. And none of the people responsible for these decisions would have taken responsibility or even shown any sympathy or acknowledged how they had a part to play. They would have just said, well, but the moment a transgender athlete cries about being called male, they unleash all of these attacks on the female athletes because their priority are the male athletes, clearly. So Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, where's your concern for the female athletes and how this is going to affect them? Where's your concern for the little girls and how it's going to affect them and derail their careers? Because you claim to care about them when it comes to pay. You claim to care about them when it comes to those matters. But the very foundation and integrity of their sports, that doesn't matter anymore, apparently. Women also deserve their own scholarships, to have a fair shot of obtaining scholarships. They don't need their scholarships taken away by male athletes. And what you're advocating for is for money to be taken out of the pocket of women. How ironic. This is advocating for scholarships to be taken away from women, for prize money to be taken away from women. And as Megyn Kelly said, these women don't have daughters. They're not thinking about the future of young women. They're thinking about the points they can score, virtue signaling, the points they can score with their radical leftist buddies. That's all they're thinking about.
The meeting comes as over 3,000 current and former athletes wrote a letter to the NCAA calling on them to protect women's sports. Paula Scanlon and Adriana McLam are former NCAA athletes. They signed on to this letter, and they both join me now. Paula, good morning to you. Adriana as well. But to you first, Paula, what do you think about this meeting that's going to be happening later today? Do you think that the NCAA is going to make a decision here when it comes to transgender women in women's sports? And if so, what is your message to the NCAA ahead of this meeting?
Yeah, my message to them is obviously they should do the right thing and say males do not belong in women's sports. Obviously, the NAIA, a smaller sort of NCAA competitor, made the decision to ban males from women's sports. And I think the NCAA has to follow suit. And if they don't, it's going to be very challenging for them. They're definitely going to hear from us. They're going to hear from a lot of other athletes that object to competing against males. But I'm very, very interested to see what they end up doing with that. Obviously, if they don't end up making this decision, it's going to look so much worse on them. The right thing to do is to say no to having males competing. But again, I can't control them. They've had so much time to fix this issue. Again, the NCAA championship where Leah Thomas, a male, won an NCAA championship was 2 years ago. They've had 2 years now to fix this, and they've done nothing.
Adriana, what is your message to the NCAA?
Yeah, the big thing is to provide female athletes the opportunities that athletes like myself and Paula were provided. And by letting biological males compete in women's sports, they're taking away scholarship opportunities, roster spots, starting positions away from many athletes. And we want them to step up, just like Paula said, like the NAIA did, and protect the athletes that they represent. And I will also say that number 3,000 is now at 6,000 and climbing. I got the report this morning.
Oh, wow. More than double what we learned about last night. So there is, there's obviously a huge momentum on your side of the argument. On the other side of it, there's a group called Athlete Ally, Paula, and they also wrote to the NCAA. They define themselves as a queer sports advocacy group. Athlete athletes like Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird signed on to this letter, and they say to deny transgender athletes the fundamental right to be who they are, to access the sport they love, and to receive the proven mental and physical health benefits of sport goes against the very principles of the NCAA Constitution. We call on you to be on the right side of history and affirm that sport is truly for us all. So what is your reaction? What is your reaction to that, the other side of the argument?
I mean, again, I've been hearing it for years now. It's so funny, actually, that quote, the right side of history, that is the exact thing the University of Pennsylvania told myself and my teammates before we spoke out against this. They said, you will be on the wrong side of history. So it's so interesting that they're not even creative enough to have unique language. Every single organization that's for this opposite side just says the exact same thing. I think no one is denying anyone the right to be themselves. That's an argument the other side says a lot. Everyone has a place in sports. It just needs to be done in fair sex-based categories. And again, people who argue against this, these women, these female athletes, Sue Bird, Megan Rapinoe, they would not be the athletes that they were if they had to compete alongside males. And to shut the door on female athletes that follow them is frankly just incredibly selfish of them.
Absolute facts there. There's no way Megan Rapinoe, Sue Bird will be who they are today if they had to compete against male athletes. It's one thing if they did compete against male athletes and said that, I didn't find a problem with it. It didn't affect me in any way. That's one thing. But clearly they didn't. They had the luxury of being allowed to compete against other females, of having their own category that's just for females. I mean, it's the WNBA. It's the US national women's team. They had those luxuries, but they want to deny that to the young and up-and-coming athletes who come behind them. That's unforgivable. I mean, it doesn't sound like they have as much support as the people who are advocating for women. So she said that it's got up to about 6,000 people. The other athletes who signed the pledge were Becky Sauerbrunn, Sam Mewis, and Lynn Williams. And we have WNBA players who signed the pledge: Brianna Turner and Laisha Clarendon. And Brooke Ford signed the pledge. She is an Olympic silver medalist in swimming. No thought for what her girls Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon went through. And Leah Thomas wants to go to the Paris Olympics. So Brooke may have to compete against Leah, but athletes like Brooke don't seem to think about the implications of Leah competing in the Olympics. That means a woman doesn't qualify because Leah will take her place. And that means various records could be at stake. No women's record should be held by a male athlete, but that's what these athletes are advocating for. They fail to realize that once those records are held by male athletes, the chances of a woman coming along and beating those records are slim to none, unless she's doped up. So the NCAA, speaking to NBC News, they said college sports are the premier stage for women's sports in America, and the NCAA will continue to promote Title IX, make unprecedented investments in women's sports, and ensure fair competition for all student athletes in all NCAA championships. So they said nothing. They gave no indication. They keep saying that they're committed to making sure competitions are fair. I've got nothing to say to that because the insanity speaks for itself. So let me know what you think. Why do you think female athletes, both past and present, are advocating for male athletes to infringe upon women's sports? Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, like and subscribe, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.